The sun had begun its slow descent, spilling molten light across the desert's ridges, when Hollis Creed spotted something lying still among the red dust. From the back of his horse, it looked like fabric, caught on a dead branch maybe, but something didn't sit right. He clicked his tongue, urging his mare closer, and what he found made the air feel suddenly heavier. A woman. Unmoving. Her limbs twisted, her skin dry and tight like leather left too long in the sun. He was off his saddle in seconds. She looked like someone who didn't belong out here. Not in that silky dress, not with that silver bracelet clinging to her wrist. Her hair, a deep copper gold, was matted with dust, and her lips were cracked from heat. Hollis knelt beside her, placed 2 fingers at her neck. There, faint, but there. Without a word, he lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Whatever story brought her out here, it had nearly finished her. The ride back to his ranch was slow. The mare, Delta, sensed the urgency, but the land wasn't forgiving. Hollis's eyes stayed on the horizon, but his mind kept drifting back to the woman in his arms. She was too polished, too clean beneath the dirt, someone who'd probably never held a shovel, much Minos fought for breath in a dry canyon. But he didn't ask questions. Not yet. By the time they reached the porch of the Creed ranch, the sky was bruised with twilight. He laid her gently on the old leather couch, fetched a clean rag, and dabbed her forehead with cool water. When she stirred, it was barely more than a twitch. Her eyes opened slowly, 2 stormy shades of gray-green, blinking as if the world looked different now. "Where am I?" she whispered, voice like brittle paper. "Safe," he said, quiet but firm. "Found you past Sand Hollow. You've been out there too long." She didn't say much after that. Just nodded, then slipped back into unconsciousness. Hollis sat by the fireplace that night, watching her sleep like a man waiting for a sign. The desert had never delivered him anything but silence, until now. Something about her didn't make sense, but it wasn't the mystery that gnawed at him. It was the feeling he couldn't name yet, like the wind had shifted and something was coming. And Vesper Ellowyn, though she hadn't spoken her name, wasn't ready to remember who she truly was. If this story already got you hooked, just wait for what's coming next. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. Something about Vesper doesn't add up, and Hollis has no idea what he's brought home. Comment, what was she doing in the desert? The morning light crept slowly through the worn blinds, casting pale lines across the wooden floor. Hollis was already up, moving through the kitchen with quiet efficiency. He brewed coffee, cracked eggs into a pan, and listened. Not just for movement, but for anything. It had been years since anyone but him filled this house with breath, and the silence now felt full of things unspoken. As he flipped the eggs, he heard the creak of the couch springs. She was waking. Vesper sat up slowly, her body stiff from the night. The quilt that covered her slipped down to her waist, and she pulled it tighter instinctively. Her eyes scanned the room like she was seeing it for the first time. The old Navajo rug, the rifle above the door, the scent of smoke in the walls. When her eyes landed on Hollis, standing with a steaming mug in one hand, she froze for just a second. "You found me?" she asked. He nodded once. "Out by Sand Hollow. You were half buried." He placed the mug on the table beside her. "Drink slow." She took it with both hands, her fingers trembling slightly. "You remember anything?" he asked, leaning on the kitchen counter, arms crossed. Vesper hesitated, eyes fixed on the coffee. "Bits," she said. "But it's all scrambled. I know my name, Vesper, but not how I got out there." Hollis didn't push. He didn't need to. He saw something in her eyes, not fear, exactly, but weight. Like someone carrying a secret that had grown too heavy. He'd seen that look in soldiers who came back changed, in farmers who lost too much in one season. "You don't have to talk now," he said plainly. Just heal. That's enough for today." She looked up, and for the first time, offered a faint smile. It didn't quite reach her eyes. Later that afternoon, while Hollis worked in the barn, Vesper wandered the house. Every step she took seemed hesitant, like the floorboards might betray her. In the hallway, she paused at a set of shelves filled with old photographs. One frame held an image of two boys standing by a fence, one clearly Hollis, the other smiling wider, a brother maybe. The sight made something ache in her chest. Not from memory, but from longing. A family that felt untouched by the world she came from. As she turned to head back, she noticed a worn envelope tucked behind a book, its corner marked with a familiar emblem. Her breath caught. She recognized that seal. It belonged to the same banking empire she was born into. And suddenly, she realized she hadn't run far enough. That evening, the wind shifted. It came in low and cool through the canyon, brushing against the windows like a whisper from far off. Hollis sat on the porch sharpening a blade, the steady rasp of metal on stone calming his thoughts. Inside, Vesper moved with more strength now, but still with that cautious grace, like someone used to hiding even in plain sight. He noticed the way she watched the shadows, how she flinched at sudden sounds. The desert had marked her, but it wasn't the only thing chasing her. She joined him on the porch, cradling a second mug of coffee he hadn't offered. She'd helped herself this time. That alone told him something had changed. "It's quiet here," she said, almost to herself. "Too quiet, maybe." Hollis didn't look up from the knife. "Quiet ain't bad," he replied. "Noise don't always mean life." She glanced at him, then at the horizon, where the sun was melting into the red rock. "Where I come from, quiet meant something was wrong." He looked at her then, really looked. Her face was softer in the gold light, but her eyes were tight, guarded. "Where do you come from?" he asked. She hesitated. "Too long." "North," she said finally. "Near Denver." It was close enough to the truth not to ring false, but far enough to keep her walls intact. Hollis didn't press, but he filed it away, the way a man does when he's been taught to listen more than speak. That night, while Hollis slept, Vesper stood in front of the bookshelf again. Her fingers hovered over the envelope she'd seen before. The embossed crest stared back at her, a coiled lion and 3 stars. The Ellowyn family seal. It looked older than she remembered. Torn in one corner, like it had been opened and shut again too many times. Her name wasn't on it, but her blood ran through it. She slid it out, opened it, and scanned the first lines. The words made her knees weak. It was addressed to Silas Ellowyn, her father, from someone named Baxley Crow. The letter spoke of consolidation, missing assets, and a situation being monitored. Her breath hitched. Her father was supposed to be in control. Always. If Baxley was writing to him like this, something had shifted. Something big. She shoved the letter back into place, chest tight, heart pounding. Somewhere out there, someone knew she was gone. And maybe, just maybe, they were already looking. The next morning came with a softness that didn't match Vesper's nerves. The desert was still, almost reverent, as if it, too, was holding its breath. Hollis was already outside, feeding the mare and checking the fencing. Vesper watched him through the kitchen window, his movements slow, methodical, like the land had trained him to never rush. She envied that. Her life had always been motion, planning, control. And now she was floating in a place that asked for none of that. When she stepped out onto the porch, he looked up. "You sleep any?" he asked. She shrugged. "Some." The truth was, she hadn't. Her mind had spun all night with the letter, with thoughts of Baxley Crow and what he might be planning. But none of that could be said. Not yet. "You always do everything by hand?" she asked, trying to shift the weight of silence. Hollis gave a half-smile. Machines break. Hands don't, least not all at once. Later, while repairing a loose gate, Hollis told her about his brother. Name was Jonas. Older than me by 6 years. Taught me everything I know. His voice didn't waver, but something in his jaw tensed. He died on this land. Tractor flipped on him one summer. Vesper listened without interrupting. Pain lived in that story, old and settled like the dust in the cracks of the barn wood. After that, I didn't leave much. Figured the land needed someone who'd stay. She wanted to ask if he ever wished for more, if he ever thought about leaving. But before the words could come, a noise cut through the air, distant but sharp. A car engine. Not common out there. Not this far from the main road. Hollis straightened, eyes narrowing. That's not a neighbor. Vesper's heart jumped. She stepped back from the fence instinctively. Maybe someone's lost, she offered weakly. But they both knew better. The car didn't come closer. The sound faded after a minute, swallowed by the hills. Still, something about it lingered. Hollis said nothing, but she saw his shoulders stay tense long after the silence returned. That night, as she lay awake again, she stared at the ceiling, counting seconds between each breath. The desert, once still, now felt alive, like it was watching. And Vesper knew then, the past wasn't done with her. It had just started to catch up. 3 days had passed since Vesper collapsed in the sand, and though her body had begun to heal, her mind was a storm beneath still waters. She helped Hollis around the ranch now, brushing the mare, collecting eggs, folding laundry on the porch, but every smile was borrowed, and every quiet moment was haunted by what she hadn't told him. She could feel the truth coiled inside her chest, growing heavier by the hour. That afternoon, a truck pulled up the long dirt road, leaving a trail of dust in the air like smoke from a fire. Vesper froze by the clothesline, a towel clenched tight in her hands. Hollis stepped out of the barn, wiping grease from his fingers. "You expecting someone?" she asked too quickly. He shook his head. "Only folks that come up this road either live here or are looking for something." The man who stepped out was tall, thin, and wore a clean shirt that hadn't seen a ranch in its life. He smiled too easily. "Afternoon," he called. "Name's Jared. Just passin' through. Had some questions about the Old Bailey property. Heard it's up for sale?" Hollis didn't answer right away. He studied the man like a riddle. "That property's been empty for years," he said flatly. "Who gave you directions out here?" Jared shrugged. "Friend of a friend. You know how it is." Vesper kept her eyes down. She didn't breathe. Something in the man's voice, or maybe the way his gaze lingered just a second too long, made her stomach tighten. When he finally left, Hollis waited until the dust had fully settled before speaking. "That man wasn't looking for property," he said, still staring at the road. "Nope," she replied, forcing calm into her voice. "He wasn't." Hollis looked at her then, and something passed between them. Not accusation. Not quite. But something close to knowing. Later that night, after dinner, Vesper sat outside with a blanket around her shoulders. Hollis handed her a cup of tea, strong and bitter, like the kind his aunt used to make. "I've seen that look before," he said. "Folks runnin' from something don't always run fast enough." She didn't answer. Not at first. Then, softly, she whispered, "Do you know the name Baxley Crow?" Hollis paused, one hand still on the railing. "I've heard it," he said. No one says it with a smile. She didn't explain how she knew him. She didn't need to. The way her eyes filled, the way her shoulders curled in, it was all there. And in that silence, something shifted between them. Trust, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Jared seemed friendly, but something felt off. Would you trust him or run? And if you were Vesper, would you tell the truth about Baxley Crow or keep it buried? Eyes drop a comment. What would you do in her place? The next morning, the sky wore a different face. Clouds stretched low across the desert like bruises, and the wind carried a chill Hollis hadn't felt in weeks. He stood on the porch with his arms crossed, watching the horizon the way his father used to before a storm. Vesper joined him in silence, pulling her sweater tighter, her gaze heavy. The night before had changed something, not with words, but with weight. She'd said the name, and now it lived between them. "I was engaged," she said quietly, not looking at him. Hollis glanced sideways but said nothing. "It wasn't love," she continued. "It was strategic. My family does that sort of thing. I agreed because it was easier than fighting." The words came like stones falling one at a time. "And then I found out what kind of man he really was." Her voice thinned. "Baxley Crow isn't just dangerous with money. He's dangerous without it too." Hollis took that in slowly. The name made more sense now. The visit from the man in the clean shirt, the envelope hidden behind the bookshelf, the way she never quite rested even when she smiled. "So you ran," he said. She nodded. "And he'll come looking. Not because he loves me, but because losing me means losing something bigger." She didn't say the word control, but it was there, in her trembling hands. A low rumble echoed in the distance. Not thunder, but an engine again, far off, heading somewhere it shouldn't. Hollis tensed, jaw tight. "I've got a place out past the dry creek," he said. "Old hunting cabin. No one goes out there." Vesper looked at him, eyes wide. "You're offering to hide me?" He met her gaze. "I'm offering to buy us time." The wind picked up, lifting dust into little spirals. The land felt suddenly exposed. Back inside, Hollis packed a duffel with supplies, canned food, bandages, a flashlight, extra water. He moved like a man used to preparing for hard times, as if he'd always known they would return. Vesper sat at the table, fingers clenched together, her mind spinning. She thought of her father, of the papers he must be signing in her absence, of the people Crow would send next, louder, stronger, more certain. As Hollis zipped the bag shut, a crow landed on the fence post outside, its eyes sharp and still. Neither of them said it, but both felt it in their bones. The desert wasn't going to keep her secret much longer. The trail to the cabin was narrow and rough, lined with sagebrush and quiet warnings. Hollis rode ahead on Delta, Vesper sitting behind him with her arms wrapped loosely around his waist. Neither spoke much. The air between them was thick with the kind of silence that says more than words. It took nearly an hour to reach the edge of the ravine where the hunting cabin waited, half swallowed by cedar trees and thyme. The place was small. One room, a metal roof, a wood-burning stove in the corner, but it was clean. Safe. Vesper stepped inside first, her boots echoing on the wooden floor. She touched the windowsill, ran her fingers along a beam. "You built this?" she asked. Hollis nodded. "My brother and I. Years ago." There was a softness in his voice when he said it, like the memory still lived there, under the dust. She glanced back at him. "You trusted me enough to bring me here." "I don't know if it's trust," he said. "Maybe it's just, I can't turn my back on someone who's trying not to break." His words sat in the air like a match waiting to strike. She looked down, nodded once, and said nothing. For the first time, she felt the full weight of what she'd brought with her, not just fear, but the damage of disappearing. That night, after a quiet meal, they sat by the stove while the wind pushed against the cabin walls. "What happens if he finds me?" she asked. Her voice was low, but steady. Hollis didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire. "Then he'll wish he hadn't." The line was simple, but the way he said it made her chest tighten. There was no threat in it, just fact, like a man who'd made peace with what he might have to do. Before she could respond, something outside shifted, a soft creak, too controlled to be the wind. Hollis stood instantly. His hand went to the rifle by the door. Vesper held her breath. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Moving just beyond the cabin wall. Whoever it was didn't knock. Didn't call out. Just circled, quiet as a hunter. They stood frozen, hearts pounding in time with each other. Then, just as suddenly as it came, the noise stopped. Silence returned, but now it felt different. Not safe. Not finished. And in that silence, Vesper knew. He'd found her. Or someone had. The morning after the footsteps, the air felt sharp, too still, like the desert was holding back something violent. Hollis barely slept. He'd taken turns watching through the window, rifle across his lap. Vesper lay curled in the corner, wrapped in an old quilt, her eyes wide even when closed. The visitor hadn't come back. But they both knew that meant nothing. The silence wasn't peace. It was planning. Hollis boiled coffee over the stove, keeping his eyes on the trees outside. "We can't stay," he said finally. "They know where we are. Or they will soon." Vesper sat up slowly. Her face was pale, her lips drawn tight. "I'm sorry," she said, almost to herself. "I thought I could outrun it. I thought coming here would slow it all down." Hollis didn't respond right away. He just handed her the coffee and sat beside her, the distance between them smaller than it had ever been. "You should know something," she said after a long pause. "There's money involved. A lot of it. Not just mine. Crow's been laundering through the family trust for years. I found documents. Ledgers. I made copies." Her voice cracked. "I hid them before I ran. He knows that. That's what he really wants." Hollis blinked slowly, jaw tight. "And where are they now?" She looked at him. "I don't know if they're safe anymore." A sound cracked outside. A twig snapping. Both of them froze. Hollis reached for the rifle without a word and motioned her toward the back. "Go to the storage hatch. Stay low." She didn't argue. She moved like her body remembered danger even before her mind did. Hollis crept toward the window and pulled the curtain back just an inch. A shadow moved through the brush, tall, steady, watching. Then it was gone again. For minutes that stretched like hours, the cabin remained still. Nothing more came. But the damage was done. The message had been sent. They weren't just being watched, they were being measured. Tested. Cornered. When Vesper came out from hiding, her hands were shaking. "How long do we have?" she whispered. Hollis looked at her, and for once let her see the fear in his eyes. "Not long," he said. "Not if we stay quiet. And not if we run blind." And as the wind rose outside, carrying dust and danger across the canyon, Vesper knew the next choice they made could save them, or bury them both. By midday, the sky turned a sickly yellow-gray, storm clouds gathering behind the cliffs, dust swirling low across the valley. Hollis stood by the cabin door, a duffel strapped to his back, rifle slung over his shoulder. "We move now," he said. "There's no time left." Vesper nodded, her bag already packed. She hadn't eaten. Neither tinha ele. Survival had replaced hunger. She stepped outside and took one last look at the cabin, then followed him into the dry canyon trail, the wind biting at her ankles. They rode double on Delta, cutting north across terrain Hollis knew like the lines in his hand. But even familiar paths looked different when danger closed in. Vesper clung to him, her body tense, her breath shallow. After an hour of silence, she finally spoke. "There's something else I didn't tell you." Hollis didn't turn his head, but he listened. "I didn't just copy the files. I sent them to a journalist. A week before I disappeared." He felt her words hit him like thunder behind the ribs. "That journalist, they contacted me 2 days ago," she continued. "Said they were going to publish. I told them to wait. I needed time." Hollis pulled the horse to a stop beneath a low overhang. He dismounted and helped her down. "Vesper," he said, voice low and steady, "you didn't just run. You lit a fire." She nodded slowly, ashamed but unflinching. "And now it's burning." In the distance, the sound of an engine echoed, this time closer, faster. A black SUV appeared on the ridge across the canyon, its silhouette sharp against the light. Hollis grabbed her hand. "We go on foot. The horse'll draw them." They ran through the brush, ducking between rocks and thorns, their footsteps muffled by soft sand. Behind them, tires screeched. Doors slammed. Voices shouted. Crow's men weren't guessing anymore. They had a target. By the time they reached a narrow ravine, their breaths were ragged, clothes torn. Hollis pulled her behind a stone wall and drew his rifle. "If they find us," he whispered, "I'll hold them off. You keep moving north." She shook her head violently. "No, I'm not running anymore. Not alone." Her voice broke, and so did something inside him. He looked at her, truly looked, and realized he wasn't just protecting her because it was the right thing. He was protecting her because somewhere in all that dust and danger, she'd become his reason to fight. The first shot cracked through the canyon like a bone snapping in the silence. Hollis pressed Vesper flat against the rocks, shielding her with his body. Dust rose, and the echoes of footsteps bounced off the stone walls. They were surrounded, but not cornered, not yet. Hollis aimed, fired once. A man screamed. Another voice shouted for backup. Crow's men weren't amateurs. But they weren't ready for someone like him. "Go," he whispered to Vesper. "Now." She shook her head, eyes brimming with defiance. "You said you weren't leaving me," she whispered back. "And I'm not leaving you." Before he could argue, her hand slipped into her coat pocket. She pulled out a flash drive, small and worn. "This has everything. Every file. Every number. If they kill me, it all dies with me. But if I hand this to the right person, he loses." Hollis looked at her, pride and fear tangled in his throat. They moved together, low, fast, through the rocks, until they reached the base of a narrow trail. But just as they turned the corner, 2 men blocked the path, both armed. One raised his voice. "Miss Ellowyn, you know why we're here." Vesper stepped forward slowly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You don't want me. You want the leverage. Let me walk out of here with him, and I'll make sure Crow gets what he's owed." The man hesitated. Behind him, the other raised his weapon, uncertain. But before anything could happen, another sound tore through the canyon. Tires skidding, doors slamming. Law enforcement. Sirens. Dust clouds rising. Someone had followed the signal Vesper had triggered earlier that morning, a backup plan she'd never mentioned, not even to Hollis. Within minutes, the 2 men dropped their weapons and were on the ground. The nightmare was over. Or close to it. Hours later, under the pale shade of the porch back at the ranch, Vesper sat with a cup of tea in her hands. Hollis leaned against the post beside her, arms crossed, silent as ever. "They're indicting Crow," she said softly. "The files were enough. It's over." Hollis didn't speak, just nodded once. She looked out across the land, wide, unforgiving, honest. "I never thought peace would look like this." He finally spoke, voice low. "It don't come easy. But when it does, you don't let go." She turned to him, and for the first time, the weight behind her eyes was gone. Not forgotten, just no longer hers alone. If this story touched you in any way, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to the channel. There are more heartfelt, powerful stories coming soon, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's next.